first thing we need to do is to elect committee officials. Or actually, the first thing we need to do is turn our phones off. So there are really two positions that we have to have. One is a chair and one is a clerk. The chair, the position of chair, I served as chair for the improvement committee, and really I set the meeting dates, sort of coordinated all of the reservations and things like that for this, and then sort of set the meeting agendas with input from the committee. And I'm willing to do that again if that's something you guys feel comfortable with. There's also the position of vice chair or co-chair, right, which we could do, and that's depending on how much time you want to put into it. That's something that we can do. Those two positions would basically serve if I'm not here, or serve, I shouldn't say if I'm not here, but just serve if the chair's not here, and then talk or speak on behalf of the committee as well. Adele served as vice chair on the improvement committee in the last 6 months.
And we discovered that probably wasn't.
Well, I wouldn't say that. It was a different timeline last time. So the position of clerk varies by committee, but really the responsibilities there are to take minutes for the meetings and then to type those minutes up, provide them to the committee to vote on and approve, and then turn them into the town clerk. So with that in mind, if did everybody, Adele, you said you didn't have a chance to get sworn in. Did you guys get?
I did.
Okay. So if, Adele, if you could just not vote on this, and if I could have a motion for, if you want to do the clerk, or do you want to do the chair first? So those are the two. Okay, so
Chair, go for it.
if I could, are there any motions or any, does anybody want to make a motion to nominate anybody for the chair?
I nominate, I motion to nominate you.
Okay,
I
so
would make that the second motion.
Okay, so any discussion? None, seeing none, so I guess all in favor of that signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, so that, I'll just make a note that that's 4 with 1 abstention, or just one no vote. Are there any nominations for clerk? Does anybody want to volunteer for it, or?
I'd be happy to volunteer for that.
You're awesome, thank you so much.
No problem.
So would someone want to nominate Daniil for that?
I'll
I
nominate
will
her.
nominate you too.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much.
No problem.
So the first thing that we wanted to discuss is the mission statement. And this is written by the town manager with input from us. Basically, we're going to be the citizens' input arm of the master plan implementation committee, right? So it's going to be our responsibility to make sure that we get the community's input and then make sure that that's reflected in the plans and the implementation moving forward. Specifically, the things that we're going to be required working on are for the park, the maintenance and capital improvements, right? The design and construction process of all of the master plan improvements, including, most importantly, the playground. The planning and protection of trees and landscaping, and then creating park rules and regulations. We're also going to be responsible for exploring grants and sponsorships, donations and revenue sources, and then generating volunteer contributions and organizing volunteers as well. So any questions on our mission statement?
Actually, Ron, what power, does this committee have any power to make sure the town enforces the plans that the community comes up with, or our general input?
I wouldn't characterize it as power per se, but the way that it's set up is that the Department of Public Works is going to be responsible for implementing the master plan, and then they're charged with consulting with us. So we'll have a seat at the table, and I think that's
But we're not the final word.
correct.
Okay.
Correct. Which I think is a good working situation. I mean, they need to be responsible for those things, in my opinion. But
Okay.
any other questions? Great. In terms of deliverables, I was trying to kind of think of this in terms of, you know, what is it at the end of the day or at the end of our term, what are we gonna have to show, all right? And I was thinking just it's more in terms of reports. It's easier for me to kind of think of that. I tend to think in terms of spreadsheets and things. The biggest thing, going back to the playground vote, Article 8, if that passes, we're gonna be really consumed with getting the playground implemented, getting you know, if we have the funding set in place, then our focus is really gonna be on all those things to get that plan moving and implemented. With potentially, if the timeline works out, we could have a grand opening of the playground by June 15th of next year. So it's a really fast track. There's a lot of work to go into it, but it seems doable. So one of the first things that we would have to do in terms of deliverable, should the article pass, is to create an actual RFP. And we'll get into more detail when I go through the presentation on what that'll be. But basically, it's gonna be just sort of the outline of what the project is, so that contractors can bid on it. It's really important to make sure that that's as detailed as it can be, so that everybody knows what they're kind of working on, so we don't have a lot of change orders and stuff in the back end of it, right? We're also going to be responsible for producing a fundraising report or some sort of cost-sharing report. And sort of the way that I envision that, and this is something we need to talk about as a committee and how we want to structure it. Again, going back to a spreadsheet, I see a spreadsheet with different fundraising groupings, right? So we could have like a grouping of, you know, here are the corporate people that we want to try to talk to see if they want to commit to donating funds or services or materials, right? You know, here's a list of the different groups in town that we want to try to target and see if they want to contribute to. Here's a list of unions, here's a list of, you know, all those things. So create this sort of master list of potential people that we want to talk to about fundraising, and then sort of work that list from there. Does that seem like a reasonable way to kind of attack it?
Yeah, is there any way for us to, I mean, how would we get the list put together?
I think we just kind of start filling it out. So I've got some information, contact information from the last 2.5 years
Okay.
of like stakeholders that we've spoken to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also some other groups and organizations that weren't stakeholders, but that said that they wanted to potentially contribute to the fundraising, right?
Okay.
And we can just kind of start building on that. Plus, the DPW can help us with names.
Mm-hmm.
And some other vendors like Weston Nurseries offered some help with putting us in touch with some of their landscapers and stuff to kind of help, you know, get that list. So I think we can kind of grow it that way, but it's going to require organization, right, and a person to kind of, or people to kind of take on different pieces of it and sort of start filling that out.
Okay.
Does that
Do we
answer?
have a list of the people who maybe helped out when the park was built 20 years ago? That might be a good place to start.
That's a great question. I posted on Facebook this week asking for some help. I found a video from the 1995 Board of Selectmen meeting when this group, you know, this Friends of the Park group got together and built the playground, right? To see if anybody could help us to kind of put us in touch with those folks, but I haven't had anybody tell us yet. So
Is there much corporate or anything? I mean, was there mostly local community, like, people? Do you know?
honestly,
or-
I don't know. I know that they did the brick fundraiser. I know that was a big thing. I don't know
Right.
how much money that was. I don't know how much the playground cost, or and I really wanted to find out who designed it, because I was hoping to be able to talk to them, because you know, I've run across a lot of these. There's a lot of communities that are kind of going through the same process that we're going through, because everybody 25 years ago built wood and steel playgrounds, right? And so they're all rotten and they're needing to be replaced.
They were awesome then.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people that are in the same boat, and a lot of these different communities I've seen where they have contacted the designers of the original ones to kind of get them back involved in the project. So my hope is that, and maybe if somebody's watching at home, if they can contact us to let us know if they have any information or want to help us to kind of, you know, shape this out. That would be great.
Would the DPW have information about the previous?
I haven't asked them specifically about it, but I don't know. I can ask.
I would think they would, and I would think the archives of the Chelmsford Independent would have that information.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, they might.
Okay, I'll make a note and look into those two.
And if not, Lowell Sun, because I do believe it was covered in both.
I know that it was in September of 1995, so at least we have the date narrowed down.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions about the fundraising and how we would kind of attack that, or?
Is anyone interested in doing like large, like put on an event fundraiser things, or is everyone kind of thinking more like looking for grants and donations and individual?
In my mind, I think everything's on the table.
Mm.
I think we should consider events. I think we should consider carved bricks again, carved slats.
Yeah, I know at Castle in the Trees, there's all of the,
The fence posts.
yes,
yeah.
all the fence posts.
Right.
Mhm.
I think everything is on the table, so yeah, I think we definitely should. And the other big thing is gonna be grants, right? So, I think if we can identify, kind of in the same way that we would do the fundraising, identify, potential grants, and then sort of create a process around that. Maybe it's, we have a standardized report, and then one person that can kind of, get them out. Because I think it's gonna be more about quantity than anything.
And researching where to.
Right.
And I think that's really going to fall into two separate categories, since you like categories. There's going to be the standard companies that like to donate to playgrounds, much like Walmart and Target and Home Depot, places like that. And then there are the places that are specifically targeting universal design playgrounds.
And there might also be, state grants, right? And there might be specific park playground type grants. So I think there's going to be a lot of that. So I think as much as we can get a person to sort of take on that piece of it and to kind of shape that, I think that would be a great thing. And we can reach outside. We'll talk about this a little bit more, but we can reach outside of the committee to get volunteers to take on those things, to identify like different job titles, right? So maybe a fundraising coordinator or a grant writing coordinator or all those things. So again, if there's anybody at home that's listening, if they're interested in taking on pieces and parts of this as we move forward, please contact us. And I want to say too that all of our meetings will be televised on Chelmsford Telemedia. And all of our meeting documents and videos and everything will be published on or posted on robertsfield.org. So if anybody wants to get in touch with us, that's a great place to start. Any other comments or questions about fundraising?
I have a quick question that isn't fundraising. What does RFP stand for?
Request for proposal,
Okay.
right? So there's, and we can, the DPW can come in and talk to us more about that, but it's basically the municipal process for assigning work.
Okay.
And we'll talk more about it later, but the playground project itself could be divided into two parts. So we might not have to do an RFP for the design part, but we would have to do an RFP for the construction part of it for sure. And I have a sample one that we can talk about and look at and see and talk about if we want to emulate. The park rules and policies, those are pretty straightforward. We just need to come up with a list of, what we want to say needs to be enforced, and then work with the town facilities department. They come up with policies for use, right? For not only the playground, but all the other stuff that's going to be going on in the park. The tree protection inventory, one of the things that we came away with from the master plan was we did a full inventory of all the trees, and put together some tree protection guidelines to protect the trees, because we identified early on that the trees were an important part of the playground now. We wanted to make sure that they were incorporated into the plan, and that they were protected during the process. So we need to keep that updated. There may be issues with one or more trees that just won't work in the plan, and we'll probably have to make a hard decision moving forward, if that's how it's gonna work. So just to kind of put that out there. A maintenance plan, so we'll need to come up with how all of these things should be maintained moving forward, right? And in as much detail as we can, who's gonna pick up the trash, who's gonna mow the lawn, mow the grass, how often is it gonna be mowed, those kinds of things. And we have a good start on that already in a matrix. But we also have a sample one too that I think is a really good starting point too. So, and that's something that probably won't be in the first things that we have to accomplish, but.
We need a park first.
Right, exactly, right. Let's see, what else? The implementation budget and schedule. So the idea there is that we've got this master plan, and to your earlier question, how do we make sure that it gets implemented? So we'll have this, hopefully a line item of all the improvements that we have for the park, and we'll work with the town to find a budget to be able to pay for it. And if we don't have a budget for it, then we'll figure out a way to pay for it somehow, right? And then hopefully identify a date that would take place. So these things don't just sort of hang out there in limbo. We have an actual implementation date and cost associated with it. Finally, the community build, the volunteer staffing. So should the Article 8 get passed, and we're fortunate for that to happen, we have one of the expectations is that the playground's going to be built using a community built model. And that's a very labor-intensive volunteer staffing project. Just in speaking to a couple of the playgrounds contractors I've spoken to, they've said that it could take as many as 40 to 50 people per shift with a 3-shift per day workload. And that's over 5 to 10 days, depending on the size of the project. So we'll need to kind of not only fill those roles of volunteers, but coordinate all that, right? And then also, if we have to feed them, if we have to light the area for them, if we have to, we'll have to provide tools. So all of those things are going to go into that.
Okay.
So that's going to be a big challenge.
And a lot of that should be volunteer too, right? The food, the tools, unless the DPW can provide some tools, but
Right.
yeah, we'll probably find someone to volunteer that.
And from what I've read, there's usually coordinator positions that are assigned for each of those. So there's like a tools coordinator. So that's all this coordinator does, is just make sure that these tools are are in, and they go out and try and find them. And then a volunteer coordinator who just coordinates all the different schedules, or reaches out to different groups to find like companies that do kind of work days and stuff, to sort of schedule those things, and then reaches out to all the other organizations to get their people in, and
Right, okay.
Any questions from you guys? I'm sorry, we're kind of talking amongst ourselves up here. Any questions on deliverables? Do you guys feel like there's anything else that you wanted to see the committee work on or deliver? We can always come back to this. Don't feel like you're locked into it.
I think you covered most of it, so.
Yeah. Adele, you still thinking?
Yeah, but that's because I'm thinking impaired at the moment. I'm going a little slow.
That's all right.
I know there's something else, and I can't
We
put
can
my
come
finger
back
on
to
it
it.
yet.
Okay. So the big news, right? So Fall Town Meeting warrant Article 8. And this warrant article is to provide $450,000 to fund, and that's the high end of our budget expectation. We had a budget expectation of $393,000 to $455,000 to pay for all the expectations that the previous committee defined. And that's going to be presented to town meeting on October 16th. October 16th, hopefully. I can't imagine that we wouldn't get pushed back, but it should be that first Monday. I made the presentation that I'll share with you guys tonight to the Community Preservation Committee and the Finance Committee, and they both unanimously approved it. Made the same presentation to the Board of Selectmen. There was one selectman that wasn't in attendance, and the final vote was a 3-1. The one vote against it was felt like the costs were high, and that that there were other things in town that could be addressed with the money. Which, I get it, it's a lot of money. And I think, we all take it very seriously, and, want to see the town spend the money as wisely as they can. So I understand that position.
Question.
Yes.
Does the 450 include now the design?
Yes. And I'll get into more detail in the presentation on that.
Okay.
Thank you, by the way, for sticking with presenting, even though you were no longer on a committee to,
It worked out, it's worked out so far. We'll see, talk to me on the 17th.
oh, I watched the video of the finance committee press, so thank you.
Thank you. It is gonna require a 2/3 vote, so that's gonna be a hill to climb. Just anecdotally, the feedback that I've gotten from people is that generally people are supportive of it. And so we'll see how it goes.
Is there campaigning that people do for getting votes?
What an awesome segue that is. So
And if
let's
so,
talk
how?
about the Yes to Article 8 support efforts.
Okay.
So I plan on doing an email to town meeting representatives, sort of outlining here's what it is, and here's why we support it, right? And we have an email list of the town meeting reps. I'd also like to suggest that we send that email list to other groups as well, right? So if we can forward on or share the email and then just have it sent out to different group lists. I'm hopeful that the Chelmsford Youth Baseball and Chelmsford Youth Lacrosse would both share it with their list, since they're both stakeholders with the park. And then if there's other groups like the moms groups and things like that could do it. And then if you guys have other groups that you think make sense, just to pass it on to them and just ask them to share it. I think that'll go a long way, right? Obviously, Facebook and patch postings, we can do that, and then encouraging people to share those. And I think I've seen good response from people sharing the posts, so I think that's quite possible. We'll post flyers at Friendship Park. We can post flyers at other places too. If you guys have them, I can print them up and get them out. That's not a problem. We can approach the Lowell Sun and the Independent about writing an article, see how they feel about that. And then I have a scheduled appearance on Town Talk on Telemedia on the 12th, so it'll run right before, so that'll be helpful. And if there's anything else that you guys have, and I think it might work.
The only thing I was thinking is, what if we went to the schools, like Parker and McCarthy
Great
and all the
idea.
elementary schools? And
Right.
would they allow us to send the kids home with a flyer, per se?
That actually has to go through the school committee,
Okay.
but what we can do is contact the parent associations, whatever way it's titled, and send the information there. I don't think South Row families would be particularly interested. They have their own playground. It's another complete part of the town. But the two middle schools and
Buy 'em.
Harrington and Byam, which are zoned for those areas, would be the best targets.
Are there bulletin boards in the schools, like physical bulletin boards, or
Goes
know.
through the principal of each school.
we talk to, yeah, and they're, telephone poles on the drive out of the school?
We can do that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's.
If they're okay
I mean,
with it,
that
yeah,
is-
whatever sign.
Well, I
That
mean,
is
as far as the telephone poles, I don't know about the.
Right, I mean, telephone
schools
poles,
would have to approve that.
anywhere near where
Bulletin
parents
boards,
would
right.
be driving, since they'll be the largest group of stakeholders who's not like a team sport.
Mhm.
Parents who
Mhm.
want their kids to have a
Right.
park.
Yeah, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, those
Yeah.
types of groups are good.
So does anybody want to sort of take on and start a list and start trying to talk to people to see if they'd be willing to distribute flyers or emails, like school associations or anybody else? Do you
I
want
can
to?
do it, yeah. that's
Okay.
fine.
Do you guys want to think about it, and if you have someone that's willing to do it, to share it with Marcus, to share the contact with Marcus, and then I can work on the actual flyer.
Okay.
I can print the flyers too.
Okay.
Perfect.
Do you have any contacts with parent associations, school associations?
Not anymore.
Okay.
My youngest is now a junior in college. But,
Is he a town meeting rep?
I may have a contact in terms of the SPED PAC, and that's for the children of receiving services through special education. And since we're going to be making this a universal design, they're going to be big stakeholders in this.
Okay.
Yeah, I have
And
some
the
contacts
im-
at CHIPS. That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The impact and the partnership with them would be very important.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, if we could get them to show the support,
Yeah.
before town meeting, that would be incredible.
And the library, I think, like
That's
all
a
the
great
story
idea.
times, the toddler story times.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like if we could even post a flyer there, you know, that's where you're gonna get a lot of families.
So are you okay with compiling a list and then getting a number of printed flyers that you would need, to distribute, and then I can
Sure.
print those? Is that a good
Yeah.
plan?
We can do that, yeah.
Okay. And Adele, will you follow up with you said the sped pack?
Yes.
Okay. And, I guess if there's an opportunity to share emails or whatever that with them, just let us know.
Okay.
Any other ideas? Like getting the word out?
Yeah, I mean, I'll work with my mom's club and they're
Yeah.
good about just,
Yes.
Right.
it goes everywhere pretty quickly after
And it's a
that.
perfect target too. I mean,
Yeah.
It's who we need to really get involved in the
Mhm.
process, you know?
Mhm.
And that's a Chelmsford Mothers Club?
Chelmsford Mothers Club.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Oh, yeah,
I
that'd be
can talk
great.
with them, yeah. I think the library would be, you know, like really good too. And I know in the Chelmsford Mothers Club, there's swim teams and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and getting all those involved.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Any other comments about the Yes to Article 8 effort? Any comments from you guys? Yes.
Are you gonna go after your stakeholders?
Yes. So, that's the Chelmsford Youth Baseball and, Chelmsford, Youth Lacrosse. I'm gonna ask, both of them to, once we get it formatted, to share it with their list. I mean, it only makes sense because really the playground's gonna benefit them tremendously,
Mhm.
right?
I just had a memory of synthesis. One of the 7th District representatives is a woman who is a real estate agent.
Okay.
I completely cannot grab her name out of the brain at the moment. But I believe she was on the committee for fundraising for, back in,
Oh, nice.
94.
Yeah, great.
Oh,
So she might be a good person too.
She would be a great
Yeah,
person.
if she's willing to. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. When I see the list, I'll be able to
Great.
point it out.
So, if it's okay, I'm gonna jump to the presentation that we'll end up making at, Article 8, just because I wanna make sure that, you guys are comfortable with, and aware of what's going to be said. So this is basically just a list of the previous committee members, and this will be updated as we move forward, with then a notification of that we're now on the clock and what our responsibilities are going to be. This sort of identifies why we're having to go through this process now. Basically, Friendship Park is, unsafe and needs to be replaced, and I think there's pretty much consensus about that in the public about that. And then it also, these first few slides are gonna identify the issues that drove the master plan, and then we'll drill down and specifically into the playground from there. This is just the process that we went through, with the master plan. We'll probably follow a very similar process, with transparency being a really big part of it. We'll have, obviously, the web presence, our meetings will be televised, we'll do as many public input sessions as we need to and can. Park user surveys, stakeholder surveys, public written comments, printed communications, and then fundraising events as we can. And just noted that the Board of Selectmen accepted the master plan on July 31st. So this is the dozen of areas of improvement that the master plan focused on. And the one that the Article 8 focuses on is the larger natural playground. The total budget for the estimated, for the master plan improvements was between $700,000 and $850,000, with this, about $66,000 of that allocated in existing town budgets. So at least that 47 to 66 was paid for, so we got that done. And then one of our goals is gonna be obviously to find other town budgets to pay for the rest of the plan. The recommended fast track of Friendship Park, as I mentioned, we're hoping to, now we're looking at maybe a June 15th grand opening, which is definitely a fast track. And our budget was between $393 and $456, and I have the detail there. But the master plan overall had, obviously the playground, new lacrosse and baseball fields with the positions switched, a bathroom shade structure, still porta potties, but there's a bathroom shade structure with seating to accommodate for changing and stuff. A pond-side multi-use pavilion, pond dredging to fix the fact that the pond is filling in. Every day it gets more and more grassy. A whole host of natural area improvements, and then new security cameras and underground utilities. This is what the site plan looks like, and you can see that the biggest change is really the location of the baseball fields and the lacrosse field has been switched. So the lacrosse field goes in the front, and the baseball fields goes in the back. And the idea there was that it would sort of open up the views and the vista of the interior of the park. So you'd have be able to see from one side to the other and then front to back. There's an interior walking loop around all of the structures. That's about a third of a mile loop. The playground footprint we'll get into in another slide. And then the walking track actually connects in with the nature trails that are on site there now too. This is the proposed, all the improvements would cost, and you can see we've highlighted the natural playground, and this is really the big ticket item of the improvements. This is 50% of the budget. And the next biggest item would be the athletic fields and then the dredging of the pond. So really, the costs diminish significantly after that. So the previous committee defined the maximum footprint of the playground. The idea being there was that it was important to incorporate the trees that were inventoried there as much as possible. And it was also important to address the invasives that are run along the western side of the playground. And so what we tried to do was to define the expectations and then to define the maximum footprint. So this is where you start, and then, depending on how it's designed, you can kind of cull down from there, but this is as big as it can be. All right, any questions with that?
Well, I know, so, I watched the video too of the last committee meeting. And somebody brought up the question around, what if we cut the footprint in half? Like,
Right.
what does that do to the cost, right?
Right.
And so is there, I guess for the voting that's gonna be happening coming up, is there if we don't get the full budget, is there plans for, all right, well, if we can't make the park this big, can we do it smaller or not? I mean, or is it like an all or nothing, or I guess?
No, it's definitely not an all or nothing. So, but the thing that I tried to stress with that last meeting was it's not really the size of the footprint that's driving the cost. It's really the design, the inclusive design,
Okay.
and the accessibility.
Accessibility.
Thank you,
Okay.
of the playground, right? So it's when we look at the actual budget, it's the surfaces that add, the surfaces and the pathways that add to it. And then within the structure budget, it's going to be the ramps and the specific accessible equipment that is really driving that price up.
Okay.
That being said, if town meeting comes back and says, it's too much, cut it back, then, it'll be the job of the designer to take in. I think they'll still fall within the same expectations that we set out. They'll just have to figure out a way to do it cheaper, right?
Okay.
So-
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out, what were the, if they do break, if that comes up again, right, what
Right.
could we talk about are the drawbacks to that? Like, who's gonna suffer from having to reduce the budget, right?
It's really the strong drivers for it are really the accessibility and
Right. That's a big part of it.
inclusiveness of it. And,
That's-
it just is what it is. Those things are expensive, and we'll look at
Yeah.
some of those examples coming up too.
Okay.
And there aren't any other accessible ones in Chelmsford.
There are or not?
We
Correct,
have
there are
Barney,
not.
and then we have Harmony.
But,
Those are
yeah,
the
but they're
only
not
two.
really accessible. There's nothing else that's really accessible in Chelmsford, so.
So that would be a big deal if this would be literally the only
Right.
accessible park in
And I think that's a
town.
huge selling
That's a-
point for us to
yeah,
hammer that
Absolutely.
this is Chelmsford's only likely accessible park.
So technically, engineered wood chips or are considered ADA compliant if there's a maintenance plan in place to smooth out the ruts, rake out the ruts and refill, right? It doesn't happen, right? And it's not really gonna happen. And even if it does, even after they're packed down, I think wheelchairs have a really tough time getting through them, right? So.
It's not exactly fun if you're fighting.
What's that?
It's probably not exactly fun if you're in a wheelchair fighting to get through wood chips. If the point
Exactly.
is to go and have
Right.
fun.
So I mean, and so, you know, the community said, we want a bigger playground, we want an accessible playground, we want an inclusive playground. So that's what the expectations really are, that it's gonna be that. It's gonna be something different than is what's in town now, because all, you know, Harmony, Harrington, and the elementary school, playgrounds are really, they're nice playgrounds, but they're not what we're recommending here.
Right, okay, that's good to know.
So
It's
again,
important to bring up,
it's not about the size per se, it's about what the expectations are.
Good.
Any questions from you guys? No. Any other questions about the maximum footprint?
The other thing about maximum footprint is that we're building into this the naturalized playground, which is changes of topography and the inclusion of natural things like the boulders in the area and such. And that's not as big a price tag. So by spreading out and using more of the maximum footprint, that gives more of that just run around unstructured play.
Right. Yeah, I like that, yeah.
Potentially, if that's, you know, if that's the way that the designs sort of shake out, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that the designers that are gonna end up working with us to design the playground are gonna have that knowledge to know, like, you know, it's okay to use, you know, this type of material for this, or this type of equipment for that. So we may not be able to use, per se, boulders to have people climb on, but there's prefab boulders that look just like boulders that, you know, playground contractors sell, so we can incorporate that. But then on the other side of it is that, you know, it's gonna be, the surfaces that are gonna be underneath it are gonna be important too. So we can't put grass underneath them, because that's not considered a ADA compliant surface for a playground.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, you okay?
Allergies.
So a lot of that's gonna shake out in the design, right?
Right, and we also don't have to use the entire footprint. It just depends on what the designers can come up with for us that meet all the goals.
It just gives, the footprint just gives them more flexibility
Right.
for the
Right.
design.
Okay.
It gives them large bounds within which they can work, which I think is far better than being like, well, cost-wise, we'd
Right, yeah.
I mean, if they want to spread structures out that are cheaper over a larger area, that just gives kids more running,
Right.
it's not.
Well, and if the designer comes back, I think, you know, if they come back with this playground and it's, to the community's eye, it's too big, then it can be shrunk down,
Right.
right? So
You
it's,
can always bring stuff down.
but it's good, I think it's gonna be a good exercise to have the experts make those determinations and designs, right?
Right, yeah.
So,
No, it's a good point, though, that if it's, the footprint of it, having it bigger makes it more accessible. That's a huge, factor as to why we need the footprint so big and why we're asking for what we're asking for.
we also, I think that the committee also said one of the expectations was to have a more open playground, right? So more visually open so that you can see across. Because I know the playground now is kind of, you can get locked in and you can miss people really easily,
I lose
right?
my daughter there all the time. So, yeah, I'm like, where'd she go? Where'd she go?
So, and then I think,
Fun for kids, not so much for adults.
Yeah, so that would be,
yeah, and
It's
then
more, it'd be a safer playground.
and decentralized too, because, and that would help with the butters, with the noise levels to have it decentralized so that you don't have all the noise coming from one central spot, right?
Sure.
So, again, we'll cover some of the expectations. And speaking of expectations, so these are the expectations that the committee put forth. The biggest, and like I said, really the drivers of the budget are the ADA compliance and inclusive design, and again, having the open views. The larger playground footprint is, currently it's 0.32 acres, right, 0.3 acres. The maximum footprint is 0.89, so it's significantly bigger, it's 3 times bigger, maximum footprint. Having a mix of the landform and the prefabricated natural playground equipment, I saw a brochure today with there's a lot of really cool stuff that's available that looks just like it's a rock, or it looks just like it's a tree, but it's, it's.
Less liability problems.
Right, yeah, exactly. We had a goal of matching what the play functionality that's at the park now. We wanted to at least be able to say we would duplicate that, right? Well, hopefully we'll be able to extend beyond that. A separated toddler area, incorporating the inventory trees into the design. A segregated natural grassy area, so that if we do incorporate grassy areas, we need to be able to segregate it so that it can be, if it's grass, it can be mowed, right? Or it can be maintained in some way, so it can be closed off while that's being done. We budgeted for at least 2 shade structures, and those could be converted budget-wise to whatever works. If it's covered benches or shade structures, or 1 shade structure and a covered bench, however that works out, we just wanted to put a number in there to make sure, because that was something that people identified that was severely lacking at the playground, was shade. Perimeter fencing around the entire playground, which is another thing that's pretty expensive. That's like $16,000 of the budget to cover the entire perimeter, with openings in the front and rear at least. Reusing the engraved bricks, electricity in the park with security lighting, cameras, garbage cans and bike racks, visual and sound mitigation, a landscape plan to for the abutters to mitigate as much of the sound and visual noise that comes out of the playground for the direct abutters, as well as when the playground design is made, to design the things that are potentially going to be more noisy, to put those further away from the abutters as much as possible, right? And then finally, the community build installation that we talked about earlier. This just talks a little bit about what is inclusive design, and basically inclusive design is just designs the park so that it's not segregated, but so that everybody can play together. So if there's swings, then there's handicap swings or co-play swings with just individual swings as well. If there's a merry-go-round, I don't know what they call those, but it's something that can be used by or accessed by wheelchairs as well as by just other users. The natural playground, and the idea there was just to incorporate open green areas, rolling hills, berms, landscaping. So it's a very generic idea, but it's sort of the idea of incorporating natural open spaces into the playground design too. And then that ties in, I think, that tied into the overall theme of the park with the focus on nature and the wildlife habitat and all those things. And I talked about this earlier, but the surfaces and the equipment really define, obviously, the access and use. And there's 3 things that we were talking about. To be ADA compliant, that's just going to allow access to something, right? So, like some of the playgrounds now, the wood chips are considered ADA compliant because you can technically get to something, but the equipment needs to be accessible as well. So one of the things is to have specific equipment like the arm pull, like the one on the lower right, where anybody can sort of lay back there and pull themselves across the rollers, and it's not just limited to handicapped children or non-handicapped children. It's open for everybody, so it's that inclusiveness of it. The accessible playground has places and equipment to use, and then the inclusiveness is where it's all integrated. And those are sort of the three things. Fully accessible surfaces are the expensive things. That's the poured in place rubber, mats and tiles, and then artificial grass with the rubber beads that are backfilled into it. Wood, like I mentioned earlier, wood chips are ADA compliant, but they have to be maintained. And also wanted to point out that Chief Ryan, the Chelmsford Fire Department Police Chief, requested that we use less wood chips in the design than we have there now, because those pose safety issues with them and fire issues with them. So having the mix of accessible surfaces and wood chips is kind of it meets his needs too.
Also, fewer wood chips, fewer small children eating wood chips.
Right, right.
Fewer splinters.
Yes.
Exactly. Any, no? So this is the eye chart. This is the overall budget and sort of how we broke it down. And Adele, you mentioned this earlier. We have the prefab natural play equipment, and that was between 300 and 325. That now includes the design, right? The custom design of the playground, the ramps, accessible equipment, and then wood chips. So that's sort of all the structures, right? And then we have landform play areas, and that would have the DPW actually building those areas, and that's where that budget came from. That's between 9 and 15,000. We budgeted roughly for interior pathways, and the way we did that was just pretty much took a cross section across, going from the front to back to side, and that's how we got to that 400 feet long pathways. And that would be using, we use poured in place rubber, but maybe that's bricks, or maybe parts of that are composite. So we tried to use the most expensive thing just from a budgeting standpoint, but we obviously have the flexibility. The designer has the flexibility to change that where needed. The accessible play area surfaces, that's the poured in place surfaces. So you can see those are $15 to $20 per foot. So that's where a lot of the costs come in, and that's between 18 and 24,000. And then we've got a variety of other things, all the playground shade structures, the tables, the benches, information kiosks, and whatnot. I mentioned the custom design services, and this was a little bit of new learning post improvement committee. We were under the understanding that the design would be included as part of the structure budget originally, but we found out after the fact that that's not actually the case. So we'll have to actually pay for that. But the cost is pretty low considering. It's roughly $2,000 to $3,000, probably closer to $2,000. And that's gonna include a really neat thing that a lot of these companies do. It's called Design Day, right? And so where they actually go into the schools and into a classroom or classrooms, and survey the kids and talk to the kids about, what's your favorite thing to do at a playground? Okay, well then design a playground for me. And they'll actually draw out the playground, and the designer sits there and gets the ideas from them, and then comes back and roughs out the sketch, meets with the committee that same day, or whoever wants to meet with them, and then produces the sketch and then presents it in an assembly at the school. So the kids are able to sort of get engaged with the whole process and get excited about it, which is awesome from a
Yeah.
Excellent.
from a community standpoint, I think.
Yeah.
And then they can then go home and get the parents excited about it, and then it kind of builds from there, right? So that's a
Volunteers for the community build.
exactly.
Yes,
So this is like
exactly.
sort of it's
Yes.
a great way to kick off that whole thing, right? And then I also referenced the life expectancy. So the life expectancy for the old stuff was around 20 years. This stuff, depending on the surfaces, is roughly 30. So it's a little longer. The nice thing about the natural play areas is that they obviously have a lot longer. There's not really a life expectancy that lasts forever, right? How long will the hill last, right? But generally, it's 30 years. The accessible surfaces, one of the big drawbacks about them is that they do have a limited lifespan, roughly 7 to 15 years, depending on how much sun they take and how much activity they have.
And how cold
I was gonna
it
say,
gets.
how's the temperature variation on it?
Is there a lot of freeze-thaw cycle?
Right.
We live in New England, so yes.
So, that hopefully, the playground designer will take that into consideration. And if it's, mats and tiles have a longer lifespan than poured in place rubber. So, we'll just have to kind of figure out how to make that work.
And the port in place also needs maintenance every 2 years with a sealer,
I actually heard that may not be true.
okay?
So I heard the same thing that you just said.
Well, I heard it from you, so.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, I heard that it needed to be sealed every 2 years, but then I heard today that it doesn't need to be sealed every 2 years. So we don't know yet. I guess it just depends on the manufacturer. So,
And it may depend on the climate.
right, yeah.
Do we have any idea how much the ceiling is up? Like
$1,200,
$1,200,
yeah,
okay.
$1,200 per year. Any other questions on the budget?
Not specifically a question, but in my driving around, I happened to go past one of the playgrounds that one of the builders said that they had made here in Massachusetts. It's in Belmont, and it's called Joey's Place.
Oh,
And it is also half naturalized run area and half structures.
Oh, excellent.
And it takes up about one city block in Belmont, and it was packed the day I drove past it.
Where in Belmont
It's
is that?
packed every day, I can tell you.
So you know of it?
Yeah.
So where in Belmont is that?
Oh, I'm so bad with directions.
I'll just
I'm
Google
like
it
a
later.
Google map it person.
I actually have that particular playground as an example of the community design process. So I can share the, I think they have a website, a really great website that
Excellent.
outlines all the stuff that they did and how the playground is. So I'll share that with you so you can
Thanks.
see.
Yeah.
So, community design process, and this is Joey's Playground. This is the process that they went through. So, basically in the morning, as I mentioned, the designer comes in and meets with the committee and sort of does a review of, well, let me take a step back. The way that the process would work is that the designer gets a dump of all the information that we have, right? So we take the master plan and all of this stuff and give it to them and then walk them through the expectations that we have. So they have a good idea of what it is we're looking for before they even get here. They actually come on site that morning, visit the playground site, visit with the committee, sort of get some ideas there. Then they head off to a school or schools and sit down in the classroom and survey the kids and have the kids involved in the design process. The kids then actually present and provide their drawings, right? So that middle picture is a picture of all the different kids' designs of what they think their coolest playground would be, which I just love.
That's great.
Then the designer meets with the committee and whoever else, right? To sort of say, okay, this is what after the classroom visit, the designer in some cases will sit down in a lunchroom, right? And actually start designing the thing so the kids kind of watch him and see what he's doing. And then after he sketches out after they sketch out the design, they present it to the committee, get the feedback, make any kind of adjustments, and then present it to a school assembly. So they get all the kids engaged in it at that point. After that, there's a period of where the committee gives them feedback and says, hey, make these adjustments or do this and do that. And then at the end of that feedback period, then the company, the designer, would then produce a CAD drawing and then a list of all of the sourced playground equipment that it would take to build that particular playground. Right? So then at the end of the process, you end up with the CAD drawing and a list of the equipment that it's going to take to do it and where to get it from. The next step in that, so that's the design process. The next step is the community build process, right? This is an example of what Sherborne did recently. About 10 weeks prior to their build day, they demoed the site. Actually, they started requesting volunteer information. So they had their coordinators in place, and they were trying to find tools and trying to get people to sign up for shifts. And then they did 3 weeks of demolition and site prep, which I talked to the DPW today, and they don't think it'll take that long. They think it'll take closer to a week or less. And then this particular playground took 5 days of volunteer staff installation. And they said that roughly it was 3 shifts per day and 40 to 50 volunteers per day. Right.
Do you know
So-
how big this playground was?
I don't, but I can find that out.
I think it's similar to Castle in the Trees size, but I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that.
And would the, supplier of the park, or whoever we choose, would they be able to give us some kind of an idea of what we might need to expect as far as labor, you think?
So, good question. So there's the design process and then there's the construction process. It can be separated into 2 parts, or it can be joined into one, right? And if the designer's doing the construction process as well, they actually provide supervision. So they send 3 people down who stay on site and work and sort of help to coordinate the whole project as it's moving forward.
It seems like a good idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be,
Yeah, they're the foreman. They
Yeah,
just tell
exactly.
You are responsible for hammering, these nails
Right.
in this bridge in this specific way. Kind of
Right.
watch you and then move on.
Someone who really knows what it looks like to put a playground together.
Absolutely.
And has done it before.
Exactly.
Right?
and
Yeah.
help coordinate volunteers into groups and segments, saying, right, this group's
Yes.
gonna do this group's gonna do this.
Right.
Right,
Right.
yeah, more structure.
They get paid for that, so that's part of the part of the cost, the fees for having those people come in and supervise.
Probably worthwhile in terms of the decrease in shifts and,
Yeah.
The other way to do it is to have the playground companies actually do the installation themselves. And if that's the case, the cost to do it generally is between a quarter or a third of the total budget. So if you've got a $100,000 budget, right, for equipment, 35,000 of that comes off the top already for installation. So if we do the community build model, we can put that money back in, well, not all of it, but the majority of it back into the equipment budget. So you get a lot of value
yeah.
financially from it.
So the 450,000 budget that we have set right now, does that include installation or no?
That's
With
basically,
the community build.
it's-
model,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I'm trying to figure out, yeah, does
yeah.
this,
So we've got 300 to 325,000 budgeted for the equipment, right?
just the cost of the equipment, okay.
Right, and that's going to include whatever the supervision of the construction would be as well. But this is based off of a community build model.
Okay, I thought so, but just wanted to make sure,
Right.
okay.
Plus you get more community spirit. There's
Mhm.
there's other
Oh,
benefits
yeah.
to actually doing
Which
the
is
build
bigger,
itself,
right.
so.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You engage a lot of people, which is, really what we want to do. And, so any questions on that? Any questions from you guys? Hi, Amanda.
When you say something like 3 shifts per day with this amount of volunteers, do you have any idea of what sort of time period that is? Are we talking sun up to sundown?
Generally, yes, and it could even go extend into the nighttime. I've seen some builds where they actually brought out they brought out lights
Mhm.
to light things to finish things up. That doesn't make you happy, does it?
I don't see too many general contractors doing that with residential construction.
Right.
Well, it's a single week out of
Yeah.
the lifetime of the park.
The nice part too is people who can't help during the day because of work
Right.
might be able to help
That's
after
what I
work.
was thinking.
Yeah, so that gives everybody an opportunity to participate.
Right. I mean, there would be some light pollution, obviously, and then some noise and stuff from an abutter's perspective. That's why I mentioned you probably didn't like it. I didn't mean to. But, yeah, so we haven't talked, I mean, those are all specifics that would need to be worked out, but, yeah,
Trying to get an idea for what it has looked like in the past, so we know what to expect.
right, right.
Do you remember about I don't know, maybe more than 5 years ago, they did filming of a Mel Gibson movie down at, on 495 at the rest stop.
I don't remember that either,
Yeah.
no.
No, did not know.
Interesting.
Living closer, I mean, you could see the light above the trees. There was a lot of light pollution. But, we were less than a mile away and we couldn't hear anything. So it's, that was on a weekend. They took the nights of an entire weekend. It won't be anywhere near what that was, though. So, when you think of, that would have been an extreme. And then you cut it back by about 80%, and then that's what this would be.
The nice thing too is that it'll be spring, summer, right? So the days will be longer,
Right.
so we may not have to actually do that. And I haven't spoken to anybody about using lights yet, so they may be like, forget that, we can't do that, or we don't have it, or whatever. So, we'll have to see how it sort of all pans out.
Sure.
But I like like you said, I like the idea of having people who are, working during the day be able to come out and work in the afternoons, evenings, if we can make that happen. Any other comments or questions? So these are the proposed milestones. As I mentioned, the town's designated the replacement as a priority. We talked about the community build aspect of it. The DPW is going to be in charge of that, and then they'll lead it, and then we'll be consulting with them on it. Looking at hopefully if fall town meeting passes the warrant article, we'll need to get the playground design RFP or playground design and construction RFP done quickly. So ideally, by November 1st, we would get, so if we have the financial approval on the 16th, we should be able to get the RFP out or hire the designer by the 1st of November, and then start getting that process moving. Yes.
If we didn't get the article passed, I mean, we just don't have a playground, right?
I think then we start fundraising, right? I think we start really trying to,
Fund it
Right,
all
but the
ourselves.
likelihood of us being able to do that within any sort of time frame, we wouldn't have any ability to promise money to anyone soon enough to build a playground before next year, and given that the DPW has basically said we're taking it down, we'll be leaving it without a playground if we don't get the article.
yeah, I mean, I hate to use that as a fear tactic, but it's pretty realistic.
It's not a
yeah.
fear tactic, it's just the reality.
Well, if that is the
I mean,
reality, then
there's
that's the
just,
reality.
we'll be without a playground for at least, as long as we can, it takes
Yeah,
to
until we can find the
fundraise
funds
enough
for it. I
money.
mean, Castle and Shrees got a $100,000 grant from the state. That helped them there. We'll look at their thing later, but their total cost was like around $325,000. They got $100,000, and I think they raised like 50, somewhere in that range. But so I mean, and it's a slow process to raise funds,
Right.
and tortuous too. Yeah.
Littleton's a lot smaller than Chelmsford too, so you're really hitting up every resident in town cave something.
I mean, not to say that fundraising isn't going to be important with what we're doing, it's just in order to be able to get anything, we're not going to get anyone to design a playground without giving them the ability to tell them that we can fund something, and we can't tell anyone we can fund anything if we don't
Right.
we don't have a number for
Right, and I don't think we
funding.
would want to design a playground, go through that process if we don't know what it's going to cost, right?
Exactly.
So, you know, I'm hopeful. I'm
Right.
hopeful that we can get the funds, and if we can, I think we'll be in a good place. So,
And I, having done fundraising for a religious organization, I think the notion of trying to hit up everyone who would use it, other than the bricks, is not a great idea. You want to fund from outside sources instead of inside sources. And I think our biggest fundraising is going to be through corporate requests, and also from grants.
Yep, there's a lot of good grants out there.
do you know, like, what's the turnaround time on grants? Like, I have this idea in my mind that it's like a year. Like it's a long
It depends on the
time.
deadlines of each individual grant
Okay.
and how well staffed that group is to go through and what they've given themselves for their process time.
Okay. All right. So I won't go through all the different milestones, but the biggest thing, like I said, is that if we are successful in getting funding, I think our immediate need is going to be, from a committee standpoint, is going to be to get the RFP, get the scope of the project outlined, and so that we can present it to either designer or to a designer and construction person to say, this is what we want, right? Start the process. And ideally, that would be November 1st. The surveys and engineering reports would get done. We would schedule the design day, and I spoke with the superintendent today, Dr. Lang, and he is on board with the idea of the design day in the schools. We'd have to scope it out, obviously. We'd have to work out the details, but he was excited about the idea, which I really appreciate that enthusiasm. And then I think we need to talk about also having some sort of public input session where people can say, okay, we're going to ask the kids what kind of playground do they want, so we should maybe ask the public as well again, and maybe do an online survey to sort of get. And I think that'll serve two purposes: one, get information, but it'll also engage more people and get people involved in the process as well. And we can work through that after we get that RFP hurdle done. The winter, I talked to the DPW today, they're not fully committed to when the actual playground would come out, but it could come out as early as the winter, or it could wait until, a few weeks before the build. So there's a little bit of flexibility there. So you know, if we're looking at a June 1st, we may actually not get the playground may actually not come out until February or, you know, maybe March. So you have a little bit of spring playtime there, which might be a nice thing, just to have kids have sort of one last hurrah on the old, you know,
Yeah.
playground.
Yeah, there's a lot of playtime before June 15th.
Right, yeah.
It's a lot.
So that was kind of, you know, if we can extend it and still make it work, then I
Yeah.
think we should
Right,
try
sure.
to, as long as it's not unsafe, right? So,
Right.
I wonder if there's some way to work with DPW to really get a hard date, just so we could, as part of our fundraising things and almost a public thing, say, you know, like last weekend to come enjoy the playground,
yes,
come and give us some input. I don't know how that works, trying to talk with DPW.
we can definitely do that.
But I would love to do
I
something like that.
I feel
Because
very
when people
confident,
hear like, this is the last weekend and it's gone, now they're a little more
Right.
motivated and
I think it's a great
committed.
idea.
Emotionally invested in the,
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great idea. And I think it's doable. I think it's just, you know, it's getting past that hurdle and if we can get the funding. And I think once we get past that, if we're successful, we can sort of really block these things out.
Okay, great.
Then all the details of hiring a person to do the construction, sourcing the structures. There's a big lead time on this equipment. It comes from all over the place, but it can be as much as 8 to 12 weeks, and it can be as much as 12 to 16 weeks. So as much lead time as we can build into getting the stuff sourced and ordered, the better, because that could push us out further than we want to be pushed out. Potentially, we could have the site prep done on the 1st of May, and then build the 1st of June, and then have the grand opening on the 15th. And we'll all probably look a lot different then than we do now. Any questions on the milestones?
does site prep involve the DPW work? When would is that when they'd be doing if DPW is doing landform shaping, is that part of the site prep time?
I would think so. So site prep could be either actually demoing, taking all the fencing, taking all the structures out and leveling stuff out and getting it ready. Or it could be have that done in the winter, you know, depending on where they net out. They could remove all the stuff in the winter, and then site prep could be building berms or leveling or whatever needs to be done, so.
Will the drainage for the sports fields be done at the same time? Not the drainage, the irrigation.
So that's gonna be like a phase 2. So the
Okay.
athletic fields, and in talking to Steve, in his mind, he sees the athletic fields, the interior walking path, the irrigation system. I think that was it. He sees that as really the backstops and dugouts and stuff. Sees those as really phase 2. So once the playground's set, then that would be. And then we'll have to coordinate with the baseball and lacrosse on all of this as well, because this is going to really impact them as well, because baseball will probably end up losing the field closest to the playground, because just to get the equipment in and out, right? And then who knows what condition the lacrosse field will be in the back as well. So we'll have to really work with them to make sure they can accommodate the schedules.
The berm and the landscaping for the sound mitigation, that is part of the playground.
Yes, that's part of that budget, and that's part of that as well, right? And with the amount of bittersweet and poison ivy and stuff in that area, what it's going to require is that really almost 12 inches of the material is going to have to be scraped off that entire area and then rebuilt back up with clean fill. So it's going to be a lot of material taken out of there, because I mean they cleaned that stuff out, they cut that stuff back. I think it was in the spring of. And it's grown back twice as thick and twice as tall now. So.
I recommend the use of goats. We did that.
Yeah.
It worked very well.
Conservation people.
Yeah, I actually looked into the goat thing, and it's a great way to get down to the ground. But the problem is the goats don't eat the woody stuff.
Right.
So what happens is they eat the green stuff, but then the green stuff comes back. So to make the goat thing work, you have to do it year after year after year, and then eventually the plants die off. But we don't have that kind of timeline. So
Well, we were going to, as part of this, hire someone licensed to come in and paint some of the plants with Roundup.
Right,
Well, what we've done in terms of the goats is they leave the woody part, you cut the woody part, and you put Roundup now in the fall,
okay,
and it goes down to the roots, and it kills it.
oh, nice.
Yeah, it's really nice.
So it's using the natural flow of the sap,
Right. That's great,
so.
yeah. All right, any
Grow goats.
other comments on the milestones? And that's pretty much it. I've included some examples. This is Harmony Park. This was built 2 years ago, I think. It's roughly 0.1 acre, so it's about a third of the size of what Friendship Park is now. And roughly it cost about $120,000 with the equipment and the installation and the wood chips and whatnot. This is Harrington. This was put in just recently after the modulars were built at Harrington. So this is all new equipment. This was $160,000. It's 0.2 acres, so it's still a little smaller than Friendship Park. They did put a smaller kid area in it, but it's not segregated per se. It's all wood chips. The equipment was about $100,000 and the installation was $35,000. So that's a good example of, what the community build will help us. This is the Castle in the Trees. This was roughly $325,000, and I'd like to be able to provide some of the information that we had for the other ones. The shipping, install, mulch, landscaping prep, those kinds of things, just to be able to provide to town meeting if they have these questions, if you guys have that. And then we also got, and we got this information to sort of help us set the budget, right? So this is how we got to that $325,000 budget. We got a playground contractor who provided this rough equipment estimate to fill in the 0.3 acre playground footprint as it is now. And it was, $218,000 in equipment with the community build supervision and then freight and mulch. So the feeling was that we were, with all this information, that we were really in the ballpark for the budget. Just so you know, the debt service model, so this is going to be paid for through CPC funds, and then each year they'll have to pay the interest, and roughly it's going to be between $18,000 in the first year down to $1,800 the ninth year. They're looking at a 10-year, and this is just some comparable project costs. And then park user surveys, we did a park user survey very early on in the survey process, what they wanted to see, and how they use the park, and overwhelmingly people, this is the point of putting this in here is that people use Friendship Park. And what features would most improve it? After bathroom facilities was the new, larger, age-appropriate. And just as a point of information, the bathroom facilities was also the one thing that people said would make the park worst. So it was the best thing and the worst thing. And I think that was because of the maintenance and safety risks. Just, these were some of the comments that were referenced in the playground surveys. And this goes back to, this is what the community is telling us that they want to see. So we didn't just come up with this idea of creating the showpiece playground that provides inclusive design and accessible equipment on our own. This is what the community's asked for, and that was really echoed in these comments. We did as an update to the open space and recreation plan, we did a survey to update that plan, and just to anecdotally, the Roberts Field was the 4th highest open space rated on the plan, the survey. So people are using Roberts Field, and then in that survey, these are the comments that people made just generically about playgrounds in town. So these are the things that they wanted to see, and these are all very consistent with what type of playground expectations we have, and then just a brief history of Roberts Field. So that is
And I did remember that one thing on deliverables. And I'm not sure whether it's a deliverable or a process, but it's going to be a high level of PR, because it's through PR that we're going to get excitement to the town. It's going to, it's something that the corporations want to see,
Right.
and gauge the public input and involvement. So when you see an area where the people are very invested in the new project, then the corporations want to be part of it too.
Okay. How would you define that? Like, how would you,
Publicity and public relations.
okay. So it's like web presence and newspaper articles and those types of things, right?
Right.
Public outreach.
Thinking maybe even a flyer or something like that. I do have a friend who does publicity as a profession, and I will ask her what she thinks would help us.
Okay, that'd be great. Do you think she'd get involved in the project?
She lives up in Gloucester, so
Oh.
I doubt it.
I remember that Castle in the Trees on their entry thing has a whole bunch of information about, and I know I took a picture of it, and so don't mind me if I'm scrolling through pictures on my phone. I know they have a whole list of people who, companies that did donations and stuff
Like
that,
gold sponsors, silver,
Yeah,
bronze,
yeah,
yeah,
and
it's
I was
very
trying
tiered,
to-
yeah.
so again, I'm not just, checking it.
So that's something we should probably, talk about too, maybe not tonight, but
Yeah.
in a future meeting is, how do we want to structure it like that? Do we want to create levels of sponsorship and those types of things? And how do we identify those at the
Mhm.
playground?
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
And for the community build tools, would that just be, do the playground people provide tools necessary for their particular, I assume some of the stuff is not regular tools, I assume some of the fixtures or whatever will probably be specialized things, or would that be something where we'd see if Home Depot wanted to donate tools to the
You can, yeah.
fallen?
I can just tell you with Castle in the Trees, we did have some people, I mean, there's a lot of people that own those bizarre tools, but we put it out there on like the volunteer, if you can only volunteer by bringing a tool, you can have like a tool check-in, like initial it and you've signed in your tool and then come back and collect it. The whole idea is that you could come back and get your tools.
Right.
Some people, of course, just said, here's my hammers, I don't care,
Right.
for simple things. But certainly, like Home Depot, the in-town smaller hardware stores might be willing to do tools or tool rentals
Right.
for nothing. It's a good
Do you
way to
know, did the, was there a playground contractor that was sort of helping to move that process along? Do you know?
I think so, I can double check, yeah.
Just curious if how involved they got, if they like gave them a list of, these are the tools you're gonna need.
There was a lot of that. There was a lot of scrambling at the last minute, like throwing up on the Facebook page, hey, like, if you can't come down, can you please bring a chainsaw or whatever it is? I mean, it was very random. So there was a lot of, last minute, we don't have enough of this or we don't have this at all, because no matter how well you plan, things come up.
Right, yeah.
And so it was just, that was the platform that they used, their Facebook, to, get the word out there to everybody. And so people were dropping off tools. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I would think as part of the process of them helping us to,
They should give
steer
us an
ahead the project,
idea.
they should be like,
Yeah.
all right, yeah, here's everything you need to be prepared to have.
That's
Because they want it to be success too, right? They don't want to show up and be like, all right, you guys don't have all these tools, we can't help you.
Yeah, the
So-
conversation that I had with one of the contractors was that, the success of this is really based on how effective you are in organizing, right?
Yeah,
So
proper
it sounded like that they would provide that. I was just curious if they did. So.
Yeah.
And I actually got this list. So this was a list of the possible volunteer coordinator positions that we might consider trying to fill for staff. I think we might want to take on some of these individually, but I think we need to reach outside of this group to pull people in to empower them with, taking on these different things. So this list actually came from, and I can share the documents with you if you guys want. from the playground contractor, but these were just some of the things that they were saying that were generally helpful. These were the top level. So a general coordinator, volunteer coordinator, fundraising coordinator, the grant writer, which we talked about, public relations coordinator, to your point, Adele. And then the sort of for the build part of it, the materials, tools, and food coordinators. But I think if we can I don't think we can define those now and say we want to definitely take this on, but I think at a really soon next meeting, I think we need to come up with some ideas of what we feel like we need from a coordinator standpoint. We obviously need to do the playground design and construction RFP. That's going to be our, if we get it, we're going to need to get that done by November 1st. Start working on the fundraising and cost sharing. And if there's, I think it would be beneficial to have somebody on the committee in charge of that, because it's going to be such a, I think it adds credence to them. If you have a committee person that's taking care of it, it's a little easier of a sell, I think, rather than having somebody outside. Plus, it gives the thing that I wanted to point out too is that the coordinator positions, that's not going to bring any sort of voting responsibility with it. So we'll still be the voting board. They would basically go out and collect information and then advise us on that, and then we would take the votes if there were any that were necessary. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then the park rules and policies, that's just one example of who we would need to work with. So, all that being said, that's all that I had for this meeting. I don't know if you guys had anything else that you wanted to talk about or any questions you had.
No, I just want to make sure we're all prepared for the big meeting coming up in 2 weeks, right?
Yes, well,
Yeah.
the 16th, right?
16th, yeah.
12 days.
I mean, I think we are. I mean, we have the presentation. There's still some tweaks to it that need to be made, I think. And if you guys have any feedback that you feel like we can add to it or take away from it, please let me know.
Well, what can we do between now and then to help, I
The
guess,
campaigning
steer
has to be
that
done
along,
between.
campaigning, that sort of thing, right?
So get that flyer made up and really try to
Right.
get our word out that there's an
Blast out.
important town meeting coming up. We are looking for your support.
Okay.
And what is
And we have to give people time to receive the information and then make the calls.
Okay. So when do you guys want me to, when do you think we should send the emails out? I was thinking closer than later. That the town manager has a information session on it's either the 11th, or I think it's the 11th of October. So he sits down in the police station with whatever town meeting reps that want to come, and talks about the different articles on the warrant. I asked if he wanted us to present, and he said that he generally doesn't, that he doesn't want to make it redundant for the people that are going to be at town meeting. So I don't think we can really actually go in there and present. I might show up
People
and
could stand
answer
outside
questions.
with things
Mhm.
saying, or to support Article 8.
We could.
But it's 2 weeks away, so
Not even.
we actually, if we want to leave people the second week to make the calls, then we've got to get all our lists and everything within the next 7 days.
So I have the town meeting list. I have the emails, so that's taken care of.
Right, but that's what we want to deliver to other people
Okay.
within the town, so that they can call their town meeting representatives and say, we're in favor of this project.
How far in advance do you guys want to do that?
I think Adele's right, we need to get the message out to regular
citizens.
regular citizens, town folk is the word that came to mind. Regular town folk to this week, so that they can contact their representatives the next week prior to
Or
the
actually,
meeting.
we need to get in touch with all those different committees,
Right.
the parents associations and all the places that we want their groups to,
Put pressure on the reps.
well, not put pressure, but speak up to their reps.
Okay.
So this first week, we should have whatever materials that we're going to send to them, and all our contacts with those committees and the people in charge to get permission. And probably the second week, at the very beginning of the week, give them all the lists and materials for their families to then,
Okay.
or is that cutting it a little too short?
I have a friend who's a rep, I can ask her
Yeah, I
what
was
she
just curious,
thinks.
but what's the typical call to action and the time it takes for the people to carry it out, right? So if
Right.
it's, do people, when they get these, do they usually act within 24 or 48 hours, or do they usually wait a little longer? Like, this is my first time, so I'm
Yeah, exactly.
not sure about
I don't think any of us have
how that
data.
works.
I don't know, it's not scientific, but I feel like it's probably closer to the 16th than further out from the 16th.
Mhm.
Because there's not really a lot of, there's been a lot of discussion leading up to it, but I think the town meeting reps really kind of start getting plugged in closer to it rather than.
Right,
Further
and
out.
they'll receive the calls in the week before the town meeting.
So should I, so I can start working on the materials and get you guys a draft of a printed flyer, and then maybe we can take that, and then, maybe convert that into an email if we need to, or, you know,
A little blurb one could
Yeah.
throw out on Facebook so
That's
that
one
it's
thing,
all the
social
same,
media.
it's
Right, we could
consistent.
leverage that, for sure.
so is Friday okay? Can I send you guys a draft of a flyer by Friday, and then you can individually give me back your feedback, so just, so don't do reply alls for anything other than scheduling. Scheduling is okay, and don't provide opinions in more than, two people, right? So if we do opinions or replies to more than 3 people, that's a quorum, and we violated the open meeting law. So just reply individually back to each other. That's the safest thing to do. Don't do any big reply alls unless we're scheduling. Scheduling's okay,
Okay.
but any kind of opinions on stuff can't be shared that way. It needs to be a 48-hour notice before any kind of discussions happen like that. Does that make sense? Okay. So
And I think also what we need to do in the next 2 days is to contact the different stakeholders that we want to send
Yeah.
out and ask if they're interested
Mm-hmm.
and willing. And that way we can get them everything by the beginning of next week, or at least by Wednesday, which will give them, is that 1 week before the town meeting? No, it's on a Monday.
Wednesday is the day, Wednesday is the 11th, right? So Wednesday is when the town manager's having that. It's a week from, it's a
Information
week from
thing.
today
Session,
when
right.
he's having his information session, so.
and then the following Monday would be a town meeting. So
So we
So
want the
we
calls
want-
to happen between that Wednesday.
Right, so we want to
Yeah.
get the information to contact people before Wednesday, and then we want to have them send out their pinging to their reps after Wednesday, after they've had things presented to them. Right,
okay.
so,
I will prepare the flyer, a draft of the flyer for review and input, and then I'll contact the Chelmsford Youth Baseball and Chelmsford Lacrosse. And I guess we can, basically, when we, in our ask, it'll be, you know, would you help us to get the word out about the playground, Article 8, really, about Article 8. And you can either post a flyer somewhere, print a flyer and hang it up, or maybe forward this email, and we'll give them 2 options, right? And then if we share stuff online, whatever we post online, we can always finish with, you know, please share, right?
Right, yeah. Okay, great.
contact your rep.
I can do an image of the flyer that would be good for Facebook and Twitter,
Oh, okay.
social media.
That would
So
be
it'll
great.
be sort of a different thing. And I can have, after I get the feedback on the Friday flyer, I'll adjust that.
We should make sure we include how to contact people's reps, because I think most people don't know how to
Do you know
contact their
who your
reps. I
rep
don't know.
is?
Right.
Here's how
I
you
don't know
can
I was
how,
thinking the same thing.
exactly.
Very
Okay,
important.
That's
So
a
I
great
can work
Make it
on,
easy for people.
we could actually create a webpage, if you want, that has, you know, a listing of, a map of precincts, and links to the town's directory of town meeting reps by precinct.
I
That
think,
would be
I
helpful.
think that would be good.
Yeah.
If we send out an email that has in that email a way for them to link and go, that's how that sends them to who they should be contacting and what that person's number is, that's probably,
Would you guys want to see a webpage on robertsfield.org that's sort of a
Sure.
yes to Article 8, that has sort of the,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay.
So a link which has all the information there and easy phone, because most of these people we're trying to get are parents. We're going to
Who they're
want
sleep
to,
deprived.
but whether or not they're going to is gonna depend on whether they have easy, quick access to
Mhm.
Okay.
it already figured out for them, not that they have to, what precinct
That's
am
true.
I'm in this and then I have to, this is my person, and then that's where their contact is.
Okay.
And is a phone call the only way to show support?
No,
Email?
I guess-
emails.
Emails, okay, any,
Mhm.
I mean, it's maybe out of tone, but could they text something, like a text 4568, yes, for the playground, or
I have no idea
Yeah.
is
how
that
that works.
something
I
potential?
don't know
No.
that we're setting anything up like that between now and next.
No, there's not enough time to do that, and I think that, I mean, each rep has to have their own policy about accepting texts, and that we don't know, so.
I think most of the reps have emails listed on the town website, which is,
Okay.
I think there's like 150 out of 180 or so, I think. I should know that number, but, so it'll get most of them. But, I mean, to the other, earlier point, we could hand out flyers or old signs outside the information session and outside of, town meeting, for that matter.
Yeah,
It can't hurt.
yeah.
I
don't
mean,
think it
it's
would
a
hurt.
playground, and you're holding a sign for a playground. There's no like, you can hate playgrounds, but
I mean,
that's,
if we could get like a sandwich board kind of things with kids, forget it, right?
I'll
pull
just
the
bring
sign
my
out, just the sign
3-year-old,
spinning.
she'll be like,
Yeah.
I want a
Yeah, I mean,
playground.
we could turn that, right? I mean, it's doable if you guys want to do it.
Yeah,
It may be a little over the top, but.
And it'll have to be, poster board instead of
Yeah,
real
maybe the kids
signage
make their own
stuff.
signs,
Yeah.
right? That,
Yeah, my daughter asked how she could help, so.
yeah. My daughter's very excited that mommy's helping with the playground.
so we could do that. So we could do like little sandwich boards for, if you guys want to really seriously about doing it, we could do little hand-done things.
You said they're at
hand
the
out
police
flyers.
station next Wednesday? That's,
I'm not sure if it's, I think it's at the police station. I'll have to double check.
It's
Um,
probably
We can look.
past most kids'
And
bedtime, or
let
too
me
close
just,
anyway.
I'll double check with the town manager that that's all okay to do. And it should be, it's a public meeting and
yeah.
there's a certain, you have to be a certain distance from the entry to do it, but we shouldn't be a problem, I don't think. It'd be a nice PR opportunity.
Mhm, I think so too.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
So how do you guys feel?
Good.
Do you feel
Yeah.
like you have a good, do we feel like we've got a good start on it? Do you feel like we've,
I think we have a lot to do in the next month.
Mhm.
yeah.
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 Big step is Article 8.
Particularly a
Yes.
lot to do without actually all talking at the same time.
Yes.
That's what I don't.
And I think it's gonna be a big challenge to just define the steps, right? So, I think we have kind of a good base plan in place. But it's gonna be a challenge to kind of keep that engine rolling, I think, so. As much as ideas hit you or things come up, please, let's have a strong committee and share those ideas.
Great.
I forget, did the email you sent out have all of our emails on it?
It did, the
Okay.
last one did.
But we can only
So we should
reply
all-
all, we can only write to everybody for scheduling.
Right.
But but you can individually,
Yeah, we can communicate
Yeah.
individually. and-
Yes,
Okay.
yes, individually you can, and you can communicate in 2 or more, you just can't do 3.
Okay.
And it's just a better idea just to do one.
One-on-one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
set a rule.
if everyone's okay with sharing phone numbers also, then we can
Yeah.
do individual.
Yeah, do you wanna,
Next.
should we do a directory? I can,
That's
I
fine
can
by
just
me.
send, yeah.
okay.
That would be, I think, can't hurt.
Send email to everybody with contact.
All of our contact information is on the applications, which,
Ah.
I don't know if you still have that or not, the link to that for the town.
Oh, okay.
If not, I can send it to you.
Are we allowed to send out an email to everyone with our contact information?
I don't know, it's a good question. I guess so, I mean, it's kind of related to scheduling. It's not,
Yeah.
I think it's about
Coordination.
business, yeah, it's, I think you can, I'll have to double check this, but I think you can, do agenda items as well. You just can't,
Discuss the
Agree-
agenda.
Agree on
item.
agenda items.
offer opinions.
Okay.
So, next meeting, I think, if it's successful, if Article 8 passes, we're gonna need to meet and, really focus on the RFP. To be able to focus on it, we're gonna have to have the DPW basically tell us they're either gonna do it by design only or design and construction, but we should have that decision by then, I would think. Do you want to, I don't wanna overwhelm people with meeting dates, so I don't wanna, if you don't wanna meet again on the 26th, I understand.
What was the November 1st date that you had previously?
That was, so, the idea there was that if the article passes, that would give like a 7-day period for if there's any sort of legal reason or challenge to it. The first would be sort of the safe day for us to, send out the RFP, to spend the money, right, that was allocated.
Okay.
I guess there's a period in between the vote and the, when you can actually spend it to say that,
So,
it's okay to do.
I guess, so how is the RFP getting done between now and then without another meeting between now and?
Right.
Mhm.
So, what I would encourage is that, I can share with you, a link to the RFP was on the email that I sent, and it's posted on hubbardsfield.org as well, to review the sample RFP that we have from another town that did sort of a similar community build project. And then, I think we should come to the next meeting with, this is what we think needs to be included in the RFP, right? And it's sort of one section of it. There's a lot of legalese and stuff in the front and the back end of it, but there's the sort of the scope of it is defined in the middle parts. And I think if we take the expectations that were set by the previous committee, and I think we're gonna wanna add in a little more detail to some of those, that it's just sort of the next level of thinking from what the expectations are. And then come to the next meeting ready to say, this is what I think the scope should be. And then have a final recommendation that you can sort of compile those things, and then have a final recommendation that we can give to the DPW so that they can get the RFP out. And it's probably gonna be later than the 1st, but, if we
Okay.
meet on the 26th, it could potentially be the 1st,
Right.
right?
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
Will we be able to review the responses from the RFP, or is that just the DPW?
Well, I'm gonna have them, I'm a little fuzzy on how that all works. There's a process where, certain people in the town, like the town manager gets a copy of all the responses. The DPW gets a copy. We may or may not get a copy. I'm not sure how that's gonna work. But what I'd recommend is that when we go through the RFP process, I'm pretty confident that either, Steve or Gary will be here, and we can ask them how that process would work out.
Okay.
I'm kind of fuzzy on how the decisions are made on who's chosen out of that group of people that provide, so.
Yeah, well, if we're gonna help write the RFP, then it would be nice to be involved. And I know we're not the end-all be-all decision makers, but it'd be nice to be involved.
It'd certainly be nice to have a seat at the table
Yeah.
and to have some input. I agree. I fully agree. I just don't know, there's, it's a process, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. I know more from the business side, not so much the
Right.
government side, but yeah.
Right. So, these are the dates that, and just so you know, moving forward, what I'll do is, I'll look at the available dates for this room. It's an easy room for us because we can have the meetings televised. We have to schedule, if we're gonna have them televised or recorded, we have to schedule our meetings when there's not another meeting being held in the other room, because they can only record or televise one at a time. So that's sort of a cut down from there. And then, obviously, any religious holidays and stuff, I'll try and knock those guys out, and
And-
then,
Speaking of which, I made a mistake. It's All Saints' Day, not All Souls' Day.
oh, okay. And I looked, I didn't see that there was any sort of, I saw that there was there didn't seem to be any, observances that would make it a meeting date that we wouldn't wanna meet on, but I just put it on so in case there was, I wasn't aware of, that you guys were aware. So Wednesday the 1st is All Saints' Day.
I don't know if anyone cares, but I found my pictures of the diamond level sponsors, the platinum level sponsors, the gold and silver level sponsors. They have everyone from the Toyota, Littleton Acton Thyroid of Littleton to the state of Massachusetts is their diamond level sponsor, so
That's
they,
the 100,000.
That's-
That'll buy a lot of diamonds.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Town of Littleton, so there's a lot of information on their placard has a large amount of information that I'm sure we can pick off of.
And I also have that same information from the Family Connection Playground in Billerica,
Oh, good.
the one that's
Kids
behind.
Connection, yeah, that's
Kid Connection.
awesome. That's a great playground too.
And in that line of thinking too, I have a list of Massachusetts playgrounds that this particular playground contractor has worked on with contact names. So maybe not for the next meeting, but maybe the meeting after that, if we come up with a list of questions that we have for these different groups, maybe we can mine them for information. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
there's an entire side of their kiosk thing that has Castle Trees, committee chairs, and lists out general coordinators, construction captain, landscaper extraordinaire, fundraising, public relations, volunteers coordinator, child care coordinator, design and special
Big thing, yeah,
features,
childcare with
food
Castle
coordinators, tools coordinator, special needs coordinator. So we have the names of all the people
Right.
who we might want to ask in Littleton. I'm sure we can find a way to contact them if we get stuck or.
So you think that sort of organizing that part of it is like if our next meeting is going to be about getting the RFP scoped out and done, maybe is our next meeting, what do you guys think would be a good process to follow for the meeting after the RFP once we get that done? Would it be trying to sort of organize the volunteer
I think it
structure?
would start maybe more with the fundraising and who we're
Grants
gonna
and
ask. Yeah,
fundraising.
the grants
Yeah.
and fundraising, because as
Yeah.
you pointed out, it's variable with all the grants you go to. Some take forever and some are really quick.
Okay,
And I think we want to make sure we have that in place. You know, we can draft that letter of what we want it to look like. If we decide we want to go tiered, you know, say if you want to be a diamond sponsor, we suggest this amount, or, you know, however you want to word that.
Right.
You don't have to, but I would say maybe start with the funding and then go into the volunteer.
okay,
Yeah, because the fundraisers will not only be good for getting money, but for getting excitement about volunteering to be part of the thing. So even if we do fundraisers where people want to be, they start hearing about it and they're excited, and even if they don't have, you know, financial contributions they can do,
okay.
you can get them excited of saying, well, if you can't contribute, or if you can contribute, either way, if you still want to do something else, we have volunteer opportunities that we will be looking for filling. So.
Okay. So maybe then after we finish the RFP discussion for our next meeting, we divvy up some of the, maybe we can bring some contacts to the contacts to the next meeting, and divvy those up, and maybe we do some informal interviews to see get some learning from those folks, right? How did they go about fundraising? What worked? What didn't work? Will they give us some of maybe they already have these grants and stuff already, these lists already built, and they'll just give it to us, so we don't have to do so much exploration.
Grants are something that come out each year. What I was going to do was go and see if the reference librarian can put me on the right course of where to look them up online,
Excellent.
and to compile a list that fit within our dates.
Okay. That's great. I just, and I don't know if I mentioned this, but I have spoken indirectly to Representative Jim Arcero and Representative Tom Golden. So they're sort of expecting us to contact them with what do we want, right? So maybe that'll be one of the points of contact that we'll make and say, you know, this is what we're building, this is what we have funding for, knock on wood, and this is what we'd like from you, and then what else can you kind of offer us to help? So I just want to throw that out there. Okay, so at the next meeting then we'll focus on the RFP, and then as well focus on providing a contact list, right? Or contacts that we could get to, and then coming up with a list of questions that we'd want to ask these people. And then if we want to do any sort of grant exploration or any kind of list exploration in between, then we can do that as well.
Okay.
Does That seems like a good plan. Let's get us to the second. So now, when do you guys want to meet? These dates are all good, and available. Is there a good one for all of us?
I vote for Wednesday the 1st personally.
Does that work for you guys, or do you need to check into the calendar?
Yeah, I'm checking the calendar. I can definitely do Wednesday.
Wednesday
I
the
can
1st is fine with
probably
me.
make that Thursday one work. It's a little tight, but.
Yeah, the Thursday one's not a good time for me.
I would just love to meet before the 1st.
Yeah,
Well,
We can't make it work.
I'd love to, but I bet it's not gonna be a good week.
and we could, sort of scope stuff out so that it's kind of already
Mm-hmm.
written, you know, by the time we get here on the 1st, it's kind of already done, so we don't really have a ton of work to do, collectively, if we do it all individually.
And the 1st isn't an actual deadline that someone has told us something has to be in by for something to happen.
Right,
I
it's
mean-
just a number that we pulled out
Right.
of the air.
So if we come up with stuff on the 1st, we can send stuff in on the 2nd. When we agree with stuff on the 1st, we can.
Yeah, I mean, the DPW may not take action until, the 8th,
Right.
right? So,
Right.
We don't know, but at least we're trying to make the process, push it as fast as we can.
Did you look at dates earlier in October, like maybe the 18th? Wednesday, right after town meeting.
I did. I looked at the end of October. I didn't bring them with me, but for whatever reason, I wasn't able to include them.
Okay.
From one of the another meeting or
Right.
whatever those things were.
Okay.
And we could schedule 2 meetings. It doesn't sound like we really need to at this point, but it's always possible that we could go ahead and schedule 2 if you
Yeah.
feel like we want to take that kind of I just don't want you guys to feel like we have to meet. I don't want to meet for the point of meeting, right? So
Right.
we want to get some work done, but we don't want to get burned out.
I think front-loading the meetings isn't the worst idea, given that we're all trying to get on the same page, and we're all
Yeah.
trying to get direction, and then,
Coordinate
we won't
family.
need to meet as frequently once we all have
Mhm.
direction to go with, but I think it's,
What if we go with the 9th? If we say we're gonna meet on the 1st, then we meet again on the 9th or the 13th? Just to have those 2 pinged out?
I could certainly see Meriden waiting a week.
15th?
yeah, I could see doing the 15th, and we do every 2 weeks
The 15th,
effectively. We just
okay.
do,
Yeah, every other Wednesday,
Okay.
yeah,
to be consistent.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if that's a problem, if that's not,
Though,
That works for me.
it has to work for everybody.
Yeah,
I
I
think that
don't know
works.
that I'll make the 15th, because my
Oh.
husband is in DC,
No, then let's pick another day.
and we have 0 babysitters.
that's why I can't do the
Family.
26th.
Yeah.
I mean, the 13th is fine for me too,
The 13th. Yeah, he's
Or
gone
the
then
14th.
too.
but
And
the
then,
14th is
yeah.
gonna work, so
He's
yeah,
gone
13th
that
is
whole
fine.
week.
Oh, is he the whole week? Oh.
Yeah. That's on my to-do list, get a babysitter.
So, sorry, you can't do the 13th? Okay,
I can't do anything that week.
right. So the 9th, that's why you suggested the 9th.
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah,
totally understand.
That's why. Sorry.
Oh, I totally understand.
No, the following week is Thanksgiving, so that
No,
makes
that's not
it.
gonna work, yeah. The 9th, I could do the 9th too, if that works.
I can do the 9th, I just, as long as we think that there's enough that's gonna happen in the intervening week that or that we'll have
Or
so
we
much.
cancel
We
the
can- yeah,
9th
we can have a
on the 1st if
tentative.
it doesn't
All right,
work.
let's
Yeah.
do that. So we'll say tentatively the 9th, and then I can go ahead and
Perfect.
post it, and then if we need to cancel it, we can cancel it.
Mhm.
And still meeting the 1st?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm. Sorry about
So 7 PM.
All right.
Great.
So do you guys feel good about it? It's the second time I asked. I just want to make sure that, I know this is a lot to
No, absolutely. yeah.
absorb, and kind of
Yeah,
just want to try to hit the ground running as much as we can.
So
absolutely.
what exactly, we all just gonna go off and try to find people to contact you will send us some idea of something that we can send out to people, and then we should all just try to send it out to
Mhm.
whoever we
So-
can contact?
So I'll create a webpage, I'll create a flyer, and then I can convert the webpage into an electronic email to send out like via MailChimp later. And then I'll send that to to you guys, and then you give me your input. Consider it a draft if you don't like or want to add or whatever,
Right,
just let me
okay.
know. And then I'll commit to contacting the baseball and lacrosse to see if they'll send stuff. And then I guess individually, if you'll kind of go through your list of
Yeah.
how you can get the word out,
Mother's group.
you know.
Yeah, you get the mothers group. I can do
Do
the
mother's
schools,
group,
so I can go
library.
PTA and,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay.
And if it's printed flyers, like if you say, okay, I want to you know, put a flyer up at the library, just give me a list of how many you need,
Okay.
and I can get those printed.
That'd be great.
And then, if you want to move forward with the idea of sandwich boards outside the information session and the town meeting, we can do those as well. I think it's kind of a neat
Yeah,
idea.
it'd be
Yeah.
fun. Yeah, my
Yeah.
kids would love it.
My
Go
daughter would
for
be
it.
very
You're old
excited.
enough, they'll be awake for
It
it.
wouldn't take a
Oh,
ton
yeah,
of kids
they'll
to
be
do
away.
it, you know, I mean, even 3 to 4 kids would be impactful, you know?
I can get probably a couple kids in my town, or in my town, in my street.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I might be able to wrestle up some kids on our street other than my kid, but my 10-month-old will also be there smiling. but-
What time is that?
I think it starts at 7:30.
7:30?
I think it's a
Yeah, that's not
7:30
bad.
start. I don't
That's
kind of,
not bad.
No.
yeah.
My kids don't go to.
You don't have to
Friday
be there the whole time.
No.
Yeah,
No.
just
As
No,
they
just
walk
when
in,
they
and it's
walk
only
in.
one night too, so,
Yeah.
it's that Monday, the 16th.
So it's really as they walk in, so they'll probably be there a little early, be there like
Mhm.
6:40 or
45,
something like
yeah,
that,
probably.
and then leave at 7:15.
Right, and then have flyers they hand out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
I'll ask the town manager if we can distribute flyers to the tables. I don't know if he'll let us do that or not, but, if he does, that would be nice.
It can't hurt if they see a show of support
Yeah,
for it.
for sure.
I don't think so, you know? I mean, I think the more that people understand that there's really a community desire for this project, I think the better.
In need. I mean, it's really, the thing is that like ultimately, it's not like we're just trying to pull at heartstrings. It's literally, there's gonna be no playground, and that's gonna be a huge hit to the.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the other playgrounds won't be enough to suffice the demand with all the kids in the town. There's no
Nor
way.
are they
right?
accessible.
I mean,
Never
it would just
mind,
make all the
but-
other, it'd make all the other playgrounds too crowded. And so anybody who uses those playgrounds would want this to happen anyway, because otherwise.
Well, not only that, but
they're up.
the other closest accessible playground is in Westford.
The Ronin, right, yeah, we love Ronin.
But also, I mean, it brings down property values. I mean, when we moved to that area, my husband and I were like, oh, we hope to have kids. Look at the nice playground area they have here. I
Oh, for
mean,
sure.
it's a neighborhood playground. People walk to the playground.
Right.
So, like, we drive to other playgrounds, but we like to be able to walk to
Mhm.
the playground. And there's a lot of people walkable to that playground. And
Right.
Yeah.
so,
Anybody looking to sell their house in the area was gonna
Yeah.
want this done, so,
yes, exactly.
for sure, yeah.
You know,
Well,
realtors might be a good.
Well, yeah, maybe we can go to talk to see who's on the list to sell their house in the next 6 months.
But just targeting realtors too
Yeah.
with emails or flyers might be a
Yes.
good,
Mhm.
Sure.
a good approach as well, because they're, out talking to people.
Yeah.
I have a really random comment about the presentation,
Okay?
which is the whole, when you say the maximum footprint, I would, if you maybe say the maximum possible footprint or add like, in saying that it's the maximum footprint, I'm sorry, this is just something that's been floating in my head. So it's, if you say the maximum possible footprint, then
Okay.
people know that it's not necessarily
Right.
that, it's
It's
right.
redundant, though.
Available, possible.
Available,
Right.
it may be technically redundant, but in terms of the way people interpret it.
No, I
like,
think it's a good point.
People say maximum and they expect
Yeah.
that, so.
It's a good point. Thank
Which
you.
schools are you gonna contact?
I was thinking Byam, Parker, and McCarthy.
Harrington?
Harrington too, yeah, in Harrington.
Um,
I mean,
I happen to have a fairly decent relationship with the principal over at Parker,
okay,
so why don't I do that one?
yeah, you
then?
can take care of that one, sure.
And I can ask at CHIPS,
Oh,
because we're
right, yeah,
there
that's a
for
good one, yeah.
my son.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah,
then
my
I'll
kids are still in daycare, so I got nothing.
Daycare would be,
Well, I was gonna say, in terms of the design day, I don't know if they're gonna wanna go to the daycare, but my daughter has very strong opinions about things that she likes, and I'm sure the daycares in the area that kids would love to give their feelings about
Yeah, absolutely.
what lily pads. My daughter wants lily pads, which are little things that they can hop between, like little plus. Anyway, but I definitely daycares. I mean, the weird thing about daycares is you have a lot of parents who aren't in town, so like there's a lot of daycares in Chelmsford who won't have reps. The parents won't have reps in Chelmsford.
Oh.
Right, because, I mean, most people, or a lot of people have they work in Chelmsford, so they have a daycare near their work.
Gotcha.
So there is some percentage of Chelmsford residents, but,
I have a contact at Greater Visions, which is just down the road from
Yes.
Friendship.
yes, we should definitely talk to Greater Visions.
Yep, I can ask.
My kids are in Knowledge Beginnings down here, so if it's
Also,
not
daycares will
close.
often contribute financially too.
There's a lot of independent daycare providers
Yeah.
as well. I know we're connected to a couple of them on Facebook, so we can ask them as well to share the information. I mean, it's okay to ask people to support, right? I mean,
Right.
Sure.
okay.
It can't hurt to ask people to support. I don't think it's not like either they don't want to and they don't, or it's not like a questionable, like,
So if you guys come up with any kind of themes or thematic kind of things, slogans, logos, brands, whatever,
branding.
something that talks, I mean, to me, the biggest thing is that we need to communicate that the playground is gonna be inclusive and accessible, right? That's the big thing. I'm hesitant to call it a showpiece, even though that's what a lot of people said that they wanted to see, because to me, that kind of says that we're doing some big glitzy,
Right.
necessary thing, which is not the case at all.
Right.
Um,
And some people will not support it just for the fact that
Because it's over.
Right.
we want it to be special, the special Chelmsford. It's just we want to.
I mean, it will be a showpiece because it'll be the only accessible, inclusively designed playground in town.
Right.
But we're not doing it to make it a showpiece.
No.
We're doing it because we want to provide these things.
As part of the presentation of that, we used the phrase "from 1 to 101."
Oh, yeah.
That
Accessible to not just kids, but to parents who are, like, I think there was a video link that you sent in one of the emails that had the father who was in the wheelchair who was happy that he could bring his kids to the
Yeah.
park. And having recently broken my foot, I'd be happy to have, I mean, I really hope that by the time the playground's there, I don't have a broken foot anymore, but accessibility is good for many reasons.
Yes, it's not just the kids, it's the adults as well, right?
Yeah.
All right. Any other comments or ideas, questions?
Other than if you know Jeff Bauman, we need to get him on board with this.
Sorry.
Because he's getting a lot of experience at public relations right now.
Okay.
Guys have been very patient. Is there any questions or comments or observations or anything?
Sounds great. Excited to see how
Thank
enthusiastic everybody is. I think you guys have accomplished a lot of great stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will try.
And it's the first meeting, so we're allowed to be really enthusiastic, just try.
If you're not enthusiastic now, when you-
Yes.
Maggie was on the improvement committee, so I
Yes.
don't know if you
Oh, okay.
realize that or not, but yeah. Well,
And I
thank
was
you.
out there for most.
And Jim's our tree guy. Jim helped craft the tree protection guidelines and actually went out and inventoried all of the trees in the park. So
Wow.
we owe a big debt of gratitude to him for that. So thank you for coming back and staying engaged.
Yeah.
And Wolf is just an all-around great guy.
And in a butter, so.
Yeah, exactly.
500 feet of running helps with that.
All right, so anything else? Nope. So I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
you know what? I should do that. Let me see. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion. To adjourn.
Second. All in favor of adjourning? Adjourn.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.